I'll never forget when Mike first started reaching out to the Eagle Group well before he was getting ready to retire from the Army to start laying the groundwork for his transition. And it was because of that tremendous diligence that he had and foresight and his willingness to reach out, which isn't easy for people in the service. He did that and spoke to us and came here and just worked. And within not much time after he got here, he landed an amazing role at his current company that has allowed him to put all of his awesome talents to work. I was hopeful that I would get him at my company, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Somebody else snagged him up before we could grab him. So that's all right, maybe next time. But Mike does a tremendous example, sets a tremendous example, which is something that we always look for in the military. And you need look no further than this gentleman for everything that he's done. And once he got his job, he didn't just stop there. He just turned right back around and started providing all the same kind of help that he received from everybody at the Eagle Group, and he continues to do it to this day. And I mean, I don't know how many years we're going on now, 2-3 years, something like that. But Mike, really grateful to have you as part of our team. Thank you for the great example that you have always set. Thank you for continuing to give back to members of the Eagle Group and the community. And thank you for leading our panel here like you do so well and have in the past. You know how to ask the right questions. You see the things that are going on in the workforce and the gaps that we need to try to fill. And very grateful to have you doing this here again this evening. And I want to thank the entire panel for being here as well. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Adam, and thanks for those really kind words. You know, for me, the Eagle Group was a huge part of my transition. I reached out to Adam because I was really scared and really overwhelmed. And when I first got up to Minnesota, I handed my resume over to the Eagle Group guys, and they promptly pretty much tore it up and said, we need to start all over. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's got tons of words. It's got to be good. There's no white space at all. It's like you know, awesome. So it's been a pleasure, you know, to be able to work with the team after I landed a job to help others. So tonight is our seasonal recruiter panel. And so we got 3 individuals here today, and we're really excited to have them come to you and just kind of share their experiences and their opportunities, as well as their insights into the job search market. So how the format's going to work tonight is we're going to talk through the normal job search process. And we're going to talk through everywhere from finding opportunities, doing career searches, to going into the interview process, to resumes, and walking through that whole process. We're going to have a bunch of questions that are already kind of planned out. On top of that, we're going to have several breaks for the audiences to ask questions. So you should see down at the bottom of your screen a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop that in the Q&A or the chat. Q&A is a little bit easier for us to manage. And then during the breaks and pauses, we'll address those questions. Okay, without any further ado, let's just get started and start with the introductions. So we'll start with Anu, and then we're going to go just through alphabetical order, first names, because that's how I have it on my little Post-it notes by my desk, so to remember. So let's start with Anu. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your position, and why you personally are supporting veterans.
Thank you, Mike. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I'm really happy to be able to support our military community. My name is Anu Green. I am with DiaSorin, Inc. out of Stillwater, Minnesota. We are a diagnostics organization. So in the height of COVID, we are producing COVID tests, and we provide lab instrumentation and testing to hospitals and reference labs throughout North America. In my position, I'm on the talent acquisition team. And personally, from a personal perspective, as Adam mentioned earlier, my husband was military for a number of years. And so he served for about 8 years. And I know all too well the struggle, the journey, not only from his side, but also from mine as we moved. I think it was 8 times now, pre and post military. And every new move led to a new opportunity and a new job. So this time around, post-military, we landed in Minnesota about 7 years ago now. And I focused on the recruiting opportunity and being able to not only leverage that skill set, but then be able to give back for organizations such as this. So thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Anu. Next, Lacey, please.
Hi, my name is Lacey. I am a currently serving Colorado National Guard soldier, been in for 17 years, have 4 combat deployments, so it's been quite a wild ride. I am now a battalion first sergeant, so it's no longer weekend warrior fun. It's semi full-time. So that's a fun work-life balance. And I work for Xcel Energy. So most folks in Minnesota know who we are and what we do, but we are actually spread across 8 different states. So I'm actually in our Colorado corporate office. So that's where I'm located out of, but I run the VETS programs for all 8 of the states that we operate out of. My position is a HR inclusion and diversity consultant. That means that I am basically your veterans liaison with the company. So I work with the talent acquisition team, I review your resume, I do referrals, I do a lot of the outreach and things like that for veterans. I do our policies, processes, programs, marketing, advertising, but I'm not specifically a recruiter. I will try to help translate your skills and then get you over to those recruiters in charge of the positions and give you lots of feedback. My husband is also a Special Forces Green Beret, so he's also very busy. So as you can imagine, when we are at home together, we still barely have any time together. But I have supported veterans, ever since I've been in. I joined when I was 17 years old, and I'm still in. I'm obviously going to make it to 20, but I've always loved that sense of service. So even on my civilian side, I worked for a U.S. Senator as their veteran staffer. So all things veterans, working for them for policies, processes. And one of my probably favorite, most rewarding jobs was actually working for what's now called DPAA, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Command, where we go and find remains and identify them and bring them back. And I think that was where my passion truly started. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lacey. Josh.
Thank you, Mike. I've been in sourcing and recruiting for about 6 years now, and I joined Cargill back in December of 2018, and it's been my favorite company that I've worked with so far from all the amazing opportunities that I've had. I'm not a veteran myself, but I've really enjoyed getting to work with veterans throughout some of our positions that I've recruited and sourced for over the past couple of years. I was on a hiring panel for a couple months ago, getting to establish some relationships with veterans in the Twin Cities and in other areas of the country. And so far with Cargill, I've been able to work on all of our different positions, from IT, human resources, plant operations, accounting. So I've really enjoyed getting to learn about these different spaces. And when I do speak with veterans, helping them translate those skills and how they can speak with our hiring managers to show how they're qualified for the position. So that's been a really rewarding experience for me, and one of the reasons I wanted to be a part of this panel tonight. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Okay, first question. What career opportunities or special programs, for example, apprenticeships, fellowships, these types of programs, does your company have that are a particularly good fit for veterans? Let's start in reverse order and start with Josh.
Perfect, thank you. So we don't necessarily have one specific track that veterans can follow. In fact, when I've worked with veterans over these past 2 years, I've seen all different types of skill sets. I've seen quite a few that are interested in some of our plant operations roles. Typically, veterans just coming out will make good for possibly operations management types of positions within our plants. But I've also worked with veterans who have an IT or HR background that lead well to our positions. So really, it comes down to the individual's interest, and then working with myself or someone else on my team and really being able to highlight those specific skills on their resume and translating that to our managers. So we're open to hiring veterans across the board. I've worked with veterans in our company and seen people in our company that are veterans in all different types of roles, from entry career to senior level leadership positions too. So we're open across the board to hiring veterans.
Thanks, Josh. And Lacey?
Yeah, so I actually have a very similar answer to Josh. We do have a lot of apprentice positions. We have What I would say veterans that like to come into those apprentice roles are folks that want a career change. They know they don't want to generally sit in the office. They don't want to do corporate. I have a great example of an MP that said, hey, I don't want to go into law enforcement, but I also don't want to sit behind of a desk. And that is a great kind of avenue for them to be plant operators, line workers. It's something that's, no experience needed, but we know that they're going to be a great fit for the role. We generally see about a third of those positions being filled by veterans that are transitioning that want a true career change. We also have multiple levels of roles. So for example, IT, you have somebody that also came out, career changed, got their IT certifications, but don't have experience. We work with a lot of programs that upskill, reskill that are right outside of active duty bases or work with the National Guard and Reserve. So we see a lot of folks move into those types of roles, but supply chain is really relatable. We see a lot of folks that come out. Operations is very similar, operations managers, operations work coordinators, operations schedulers, because we know that nothing goes according to plan in the military ever, no matter what branch of service you're in, right? So you're great at flexing and bending to changing things that happen in the utilities for our construction side of the house. So we see a lot of folks in those. We have a lot of security enterprise command center roles. We see a lot of folks in security roles, but honestly, everything that you could think of that's in the military, legal, we have a legal department, we have a finance department. And so I think folks see energy in our title of Xcel Energy and they think, there's nothing for me. We have a lot of roles that kind of translate across all different MOSs, NECs, and what have you from all branches of service.
Thanks, Lacey. I remember doing my first job fair. One of the biggest pieces of advice given was not to walk by employers because there's a lot of functional jobs that you don't think of with each one of those employers. And that's actually how I connected with my current job. So that's great points and appreciate it. Next, Anu.
Thank you. So our organization, similar to that of Xcel Energy and to Cargill, we have different opportunities in general, not just specific from a military perspective, but I think what's really key to point out, while we have opportunities in IT, supply chain, operations, anything from contracts and, contract specialists as it's government focused, we also have a lot of opportunities from an internal growth movement. So, I started with our organization 2 years ago now, and I have done nothing but see internal promotion and growth from within. And what's really special about what we do and what we see is we recognize when there's a high potential candidate and, say, okay, internally, this is what they bring to the table. They're not in that specific role today. How do we get them the skills so that they can be ready for that opportunity? And what does that look like? And, that's something that I think is really unique about our organization, to be able to support those candidates that are in the military, but also in the military community from a military dependent to a military spouse as well.
Thanks, Anu. I'd like to follow up on that because that was actually really, really interesting what you just said about identifying a candidate and realizing that this candidate has potential to be at this point. They might not be there yet. What are some of the things that jump out to your team to help identify a candidate with that kind of growth potential?
So a couple of things happen initially. Maybe they're an internal candidate and they're looking to grow. And so why I bring that up is that maybe traditionally you weren't thinking of a particular role for yourself, but you have a desire to be, in a particular business group down the road. So learning the business from literally the ground up is a great opportunity. And then as we look at those high potential candidates, it's the combination of the hard and the soft skills, right? Do they have the technical piece in our organization tends to be very scientific in nature, but also do they have, the soft skills, that personality. So for example, in particular, I'm looking for, an IT business systems analyst. So we're looking for a specific SAP function, but we're also looking for that ability to collaborate and partner. And, I always joke with the hiring leaders that it's the steak and fish combination, because it could be any number of different things that you're looking for, but you want it all. It's not just one aspect. And, having our hiring leaders open to that is really very refreshing. Not all organizations do that. When somebody says they want somebody in manufacturing, they're saying specifically manufacturing. And so our organization is very open to be able to say, okay, well, how can we translate those skills? Just like Lacey was talking about, being able to translate, if they were a mechanic in the military, they might not specifically have the lean background, but they know what it means to be very efficient.
Thanks a lot. Okay, next question, and we'll start with Josh on this one. What makes your organization an excellent place for veterans to work at?
Sure, thanks, Mike. There are several things that Cargill does well that makes us a good organization for veterans. One of the first things is that we're a yellow ribbon company from the state of Minnesota, kind of proving how well we've been for veterans over the past several years. We do a few things that have gotten us that achievement. One, we have a specific military recruiter and sourcer on our team. Sheila, she's on the call now, who specifically handles recruiting and working with veterans and helping our hiring managers understand the transferable skills that they bring to the table and kind of selling them into the door of Cargill. In addition to that, we have a business resource group that's specifically for veterans. It's the Veterans and Military Support Network, and that's nationwide all across the US for veterans. So that's a place where you can speak with other veterans, hear about internal job postings that we may have listed, or even just network and continue to build your network once you get your foot in the door of Cargill. So there are a variety of different things that we have done. One of the last things that we also do a great job of is whenever somebody is re-enlisted to go off to duty, we pay the salary differential. I know not all companies are required to do that, but that's something that Cargill does just to, make it really fair for the person going off to serve their country, so they don't have to take a pay decrease during that time. So thank you.
Those are awesome. Josh, could you explain, especially if I'm not familiar with what a yellow ribbon company is, what is that and what does that mean?
Sure. So it's a designation from the state of Minnesota, essentially saying that Cargill is a military veteran friendly place to work. It means a couple of things to myself, at least. We place a large emphasis on military hiring. So we like to work specifically and seek out military candidates to apply to our roles. Once they get in the door, we like to also provide them continued support. One example, like I'd mentioned, is the business resource group that we have for veterans, and then also informal mentorship programs and just other forms of support that we offer for veterans. So that's something that we're proud to be a part of, and also let veterans know that we want to actively seek you out to come work for us.
Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome.
And for all the vets out there too, in order to become a yellow ribbon company, there's several different steps that the companies have to go through. So it helps kind of balance out, and so you can understand all the capabilities and resources offered by those companies. Okay, next, Lacey.
So one of the other things with the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program, just to tag on really fast, you actually have to make an action plan, and it's quite in depth of how you're going to do all those things that Josh mentioned as supports. And we love, as we're also a Beyond the Yellow Ribbon company, what we love doing is benchmarking off of each other. So Target's another great one, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about what are they doing, what could we do, but it's also very, very involved with the community. So you have to do an action plan. It has to get approved by the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, and then you have a proclamation ceremony, and then you can be part of that program. So they're very involved in the community as well. But so I think this is always one of my hardest questions to answer, to be honest, as to why it's a good place to work at Xcel Energy. I would say truly it's stability, purpose, and movement. Stability because utilities is a very stable industry. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. Over the next 10 years, over half of the workforce is eligible for retirement. So that's a lot of new positions, a lot of movement and growth. And with movement, we also have rotational leadership positions. So very similar to what Anu was mentioning, as you have high potentials. Maybe they just need a little bit of tweaking or a little bit more experience. We would let them have a rotational leadership position. If that's available to them, they can gain that experience. So I think that that's really good. I think purpose right now, as you probably hear, renewable energy and utilities in general has a lot of change going on, and veterans are great at change management, change leaders. They can really be innovative and take the ball and run with it, right? So I think that a lot of veterans get out and they see a sense of purpose, and they don't want to lose that purpose that they had in the service, so they can bring that to the company with the changing utility industry. We do, since Minnesota is our corporate headquarters and that is all National Guard and Reserve soldiers, we do the time away from work policy. So you'll do differential pay. You also get 15 days of military pay time off on top of your 18 days. So it's kind of what we call in the Guard double dipping. And that's so we don't have to start and stop your paycheck and then calculate a differential just for 2 weeks. It's easier to keep those on. So we get 15 military paid time off days. We also have a Veterans Business Resource Group. And honestly, I think that's probably my favorite part, is giving back to that community. So we do 40 hours of volunteer paid time off time. So if you want to volunteer with Team Red, White, and Blue, American Legions, VFWs, Habitats for Humanity, any of those, you get 40 hours to do so. And our Veterans Business Resource Group tends to do a lot of that. We do flag plantings, we do honor flights, we do veteran home donations. And then a lot of the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon has some community projects we can work on, whether that's repainting, helping somebody move while their spouse is deployed. So we can tie into that Beyond the Yellow Ribbon network and help out with that as well. So I think it's, again, that stability, that purpose, and then that room for growth and movement within the company.
Thanks, Lacey. Anu.
Thank you. It's great to hear everybody's opportunities for their veterans. And I think I'm really fortunate to be in a really small organization. We're about 300 people in Minnesota. And what's really nice about our organization is I have the ability to drive our veteran programs and initiatives with the support of our leadership and be able to say, okay, this is something I think we need. And, today is a perfect example where, this opportunity came up, and, as we look at these different initiatives that I know from a diversity and inclusion perspective, my organization 110% has supported me with any of the opportunities that I'm looking at from a veteran perspective. They know that I'm really passionate about it. If you ask anybody in the organization, they say, oh yeah, that's who we need to talk to. And I think it's because of our size that we're able to do that. We are not yet a yellow ribbon company. We are not there yet, but through this time, we have also taken on the mantra of progress versus perfection. So we are making progress, and it is not yet perfected, and we're looking to do that, but definitely to support the community.
Thanks a lot, Anu. Okay, next question. Let's talk COVID-19 and the impact and the trends that each one of you have seen. How has your company responded to COVID-19? How has COVID-19 impacted hiring at your company? And what hiring trends are you currently seeing? And let's go in reverse order this time, and we'll start with Anu.
Thank you. The impact that COVID has had on our organization has been tenfold. We have done nothing but been on a mass hiring in the manufacturing, are attributed to not only sales, but to the COVID testing. During this time when, we could have done layoffs and furloughs, we chose not to. And so we've been able to really keep that momentum going along the lines of really understanding what our employees need as an organization. Is it, family leave to support somebody and a loved one with COVID? Is it an extension on your flexible spending account to support the dependent? We are able, as a small organization, to really make some of those changes and, make adjustments accordingly. And I think that's been really powerful for us to see and do, and for our teams to see. Weekly we are holding Let's Talk meetings where we are talking about the state of the organization as it relates to COVID. We have our we had the COVID test, and we were manufacturing 100,000 tests a week out in California to really support the efforts. So really making it a true impact. We talk about how are we supporting what's going on and the future of it. We're doing on-site testing twice a week. And so that's been something that's been really beneficial for our teams. And we've also allowed, I think everybody's working from home, and we are working remotely as it relates to COVID and the businesses that you're in.
Thank you. Lacey.
So I think there's negative and positive, obviously, and I'll start with the negative. So with COVID-19, we did go on a hiring freeze for about 10 months, and the positive of that hiring freeze meant that we were only hiring our critical roles, so roles that we needed for work to get done, but then that allowed us to not do any major layoffs and have to, have folks be out of work for some time. So it's kind of a negative and a positive in there. Since November, we're almost back to hiring as normal. We have over 140 jobs, I believe, back posted. So that's really good. It gave us time to breathe and kind of reset and maybe reorg and look at a few things. What I will also say COVID-19 did impact, for what I would say is the better, is utilities tended to be a very old, aged industry set in its ways. So the thought of remote work was just not even, fathomable at the time. And from a recruiting standpoint, that's actually really hard, right? When we want folks to have flexible work. So it forced us into a remote work environment. And the benefit of that is that, one, just like Anu mentioned, we've actually looked at revamping. We now have a flexible work policy that's going to roll out. So you will have conversations with your leaders where you'll be in the office 2, maybe 3 days a week, and then you can work from home the rest of those days. That's something that never would have happened had we not all went home to teleworking. Currently, we're all still teleworking minus our 6,000 essential workers. So the other thing is, we became a lot more fond of our essential workers. So our frontline workers is, line workers, our plant operators, those control room operators, those folks that can't work from home during a pandemic. And so I think we as a company got stronger in that aspect, and then we did get a stronger appreciation for them as well. It has also offered us new ways to connect. I think it's actually brought leaders a lot closer to their employees, even in a remote setting. So they've learned how to actually lead remotely a little bit better. So I think, again, I would say the biggest negative with COVID-19 was the fact that we did hit a hiring freeze. I think now that we've really learned how to virtually onboard, virtually lead, and do virtual interviews a little bit better, we're a little bit more comfortable with that. I think we have a much more flexible workplace, and so we're back to hiring as normal. We're still not in the workplace. We're not setting a timeline on when we will go back. It's going to be conditions based, but I think it's positive and it's negative.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Lacey. And Josh.
Sure. So like both Anu and Lacey, COVID-19 has certainly profoundly impacted our organization. And in fact, if anything, I would say it's caused us to innovate more than ever before in order to keep all of our operations up and running. I'm sure most of you on the call are familiar with Cargill, so you would know that our mission is really to feed the world and help the world thrive through nutrition and food. So it's very important that all of our plants stay up and running. And when COVID-19 first really started impacting us last March and April, I do remember hearing some stories about some of our plants needing to close down for a couple of weeks at a time. And then, after those couple of weeks, you would hear they're back up and running. They have completely new processes in place to make sure everyone's safe at the facilities. The food is safe to get out to the consumers. So it was really exciting to hear about all of that and be a part of that change throughout the organization. Another thing that we do for our corporate workers, we've been able to, like Lacey was talking about, switch to a completely remote working environment. The company has already set out a kind of a standard that we'll be working outside of our office offices at least until September of this year. So it's helpful for any working professionals or parents to know that, hey, you can plan ahead for at least this much time in advance that you'll be working from home. As far as our hiring trends, I would say there was a time last year about April or May that it slightly slowed down, but since then it's been back up to normal, if not hiring more than we have in the past. Myself in talent acquisition, I've seen a lot of completely brand new positions that we've created over the past 8 to 10 months. So there's that continued growth. One of our big strategies is merging and acquiring new companies that we can bring under the Cargill belt. And I've been able to be a part of those over the past 2 years, hiring for new plant locations that we have, or new operations that we're putting into existing plants. So that's really been fun too, to see that growth part of Cargill. So overall, operations were certainly affected, but it caused us to innovate. And I feel like we've come back stronger and had one of our best years on record that we've had since we've been a company in our history. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. So I want to ask a follow-up question to this. And actually, there's also a Q&A question here that relates to what we were talking about. So we'll start with the Q&A. This one is from Rhonda. Can you offer an assessment of the strength of the market given where we are 1 year in the pandemic, and that's along your respective industries? And what career fields appear to be most in demand? And I want to add one more to that. So also, what have you seen in terms of the candidate pool? Has it become more competitive now following layoffs and these types of things? And so I can repeat those questions if you need, but right now I'll just open it to anybody who wants to go.
Sure. I can just continue off of that. So I would say overall for, the food and agricultural industry, it's really been booming. And I feel like, I think Lacey or New was saying, if you're looking for a stable industry that's always going to be around, there's really none better than the agricultural industry. We all need to eat at the end of the day. So overall, I feel it's been very stable for us. In terms of any new types of positions or big in demand positions that we're seeing, we're certainly always looking for our operational types of positions within our plants throughout the US, whether that be engineering, mechanical, any supply chain. Those are highly in demand and part of the growth that I've seen as well. Other than that, we've also been hiring a lot in HR and some other areas that I've been a part of too. So yeah, across the board, I've seen good growth within our company for any type of professional, really.
Thanks, Josh. Lacey or Anu?
Yeah, for utilities, really one of the biggest areas we're going to be hiring for is IT and cyber. So I think that's across the board, and that's not just because we're going to start moving more towards remote work for some of the corporate spaces and some of those positions, but also because we have a job of what we call protecting the grid, and it sounds pretty nerdy, but it's also pretty cool. We don't want folks to hack in and be able to access our grid, right? They could shut down, electricity to an entire town and what have you. So we are very, very heavy into IT and cybersecurity and utilities right now. And the other big one, again, as I mentioned, I've seen a lot of project management / change management. So we're always, now that we're remote as well, and there's new technologies, and as we move into renewables and we move into, more clean energy and things of that nature, we need process improvements of how can we finish work orders quicker, whether that's an iPad in the field. We need folks to implement that. We need project managers to implement that. Veterans are fantastic again at this. And then change management, again, we get upgraded software systems, we roll it out. How can we improve? How can we get something done quicker? How can we get somebody from a plant worker into a wind turbine person or a solar person? So a lot of process improvement, change management, project management leaders, and a heavy IT for us in utilities. And I think that a year from COVID, As I previously mentioned, I think we're a little bit more used to working remotely, and we're also ready to get back into the office. And so I think we're a little bit more stable in either aspect. So whether we return in a month or a year again from now, we have kind of a more stable, this is where we still need to go in the utilities, and these are the positions that we'll have.
Thanks, Lacey. Anu.
So with our organization, the bulk of the positions here recently have been in our field service arena in the aftermarket space, just through the sales, and you can see that, and it's consistent and going. And those opportunities have been fantastic for the military community, just from not only project management, but being mechanically inclined and being able to really adjust. So it's not necessary that they need the scientific background. So those have really done well with our organization and continue to flourish. And the hiring leaders have, called out and said, hey, I've worked really well with the military community in the past. I'd like to have someone else on my team for that. And it's been really positive to hear. In terms of what it's done from a talent and growth perspective, I think Josh and Lacey agree with me. The talent market out there, it's been fierce. Competition for talent. I mean, just like Lacey has stated, right? We are not accustomed to working from home. We better be. If we are not used to, our organization traditionally was not a remote organization. And, we've learned to be. We still value that in-person conversation, but now we're open to it. And so positions that normally wouldn't have been remote are now going to 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And it's also given us the opportunity to look outside, our specific area, and maybe to the west side of the metro, which is not something that we would have done before. And so that's been really nice as well.
You know what, that kind of leads us to another section. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit on the script here on the questions we have, because really that comes down to screening stage, based off of the competition that we're seeing. What makes a resume stand out? How do you balance direct qualifications or the lack thereof with soft skills? And let's start with Josh this time.
Sure. So as far as the screening qualifications and how to make the resume stand out, I would say one of the best things you could possibly do is try to find somebody within the company, contact, whether it be through somebody you already know or trying to reach out to some of your other networking peers and seeing if they know somebody within the company that you're trying to get into, and then establishing that first point of contact. And from there, kind of working with them to help you get your foot in the door. Some of our positions, we have 50, 100 applications for one position. So if you're just submitting a resume, it will most likely get looked at, but there's so many other qualified individuals too, you may not get that interview. So if you're really able to get somebody, especially if you're a veteran, somebody like Sheila on our team, who's the military recruiter, it's a great connection to have, and they'll be able to kind of be your go-to person who can cheerlead for you when speaking with the hiring managers. As far as the resume, I think you might ask some more questions on that later, but if you can really try to as much detail as you can around your actual quantifiable results for whatever you've done in your military career or any other civilian roles you might have had, and show what you've been able to achieve, that is always much more efficient and effective than just putting general basic job description type of points back on your resume. The managers are really looking to know what you've been able to achieve within your experiences. So those are just a couple of ideas for how you can really stand out at this time.
Thanks, Josh. And one of the big challenges I think that all of us vets have is when we're putting together a resume or an interview, is really stating what we have personally done, because our understanding and our view of the team, and our relationship is, it's so tight like that it's hard to separate, and it feels very uncomfortable. So it's one of those ones, once you start going and putting it down on the paper, it's easy to talk about what the team accomplished, but a lot harder to talk about what you as an individual accomplished. So that's a great point. Next, Lacey.
So Josh hit it on the head. I always say qualitative, quantitative information, and I don't want to have a job description of just what that job was that you had. What did you actually do? So I always say, did you do a process improvement? Did you cost save? Were you promoted ahead of peers? Were you hand selected, right? Those are key things for us to pull out. What I would say, if you're in the service, and I know it's hard to talk about yourself in general, go look at your awards. If you look at an award statement, it pulls out what you did. It generally has your supply numbers, your, how many people you were in charge of, what that impact was. So I say that as a starting point. Obviously, you'll have to word it a little bit better. Instead of talking about, your Afghan counterparts or the Department of Defense or the CIA or the DIA, you say your stakeholders, right? But you can look at your awards, look at an NCOER, OER, and it generally will have that quantifiable information in there to give you a start on how to put that into your resume. So that's like a key thing that I tell vets to do. Each company is different. We at Xcel Energy don't have an automated system, so we don't word match. However, I always suggest you tailor your resume. Minimum requirements are generally posted right at the bottom. What I would suggest is put those in your professional summary. So if it's an accounting position and it says 5 years of accounting with 2 years of leadership, and you have 7 years and 3 years of leadership, in that professional summary, right at the top of that block, you put that you have 7 years of accounting and 3 years of leadership. So that recruiter who has to look at 100+ applicants per position can look and go immediately, yes, Lacey Golonka, she meets these requirements. I'm going to now go and look at her quantifiable information and see what she's actually accomplished in those roles. So those would be my biggest suggestions. Never make a resume more than 5 pages. Please don't make it more than 2.5, maybe 3. And then to Josh's point, for us, the person you would contact is me. I think I already typed my email in the chat. I'll provide it again, but military careers, all one word, at xcelenergy.com. Having somebody in the company is your biggest benefit. If you find them on LinkedIn, again, I run the vets program, so I'll get you to that recruiter if you have a specific question. If you want to know more about a job in supply chain, I can either find a vet in supply chain or somebody generally in supply chain and ask them, hey, could you do a 20-minute phone call with a veteran that's very interested, that's not quite sure this is a good fit, right? Always, always, always network, whether it's in this forum here, whether it's with the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon group. I would say the more you can network, the better. And then find somebody within that company to connect with.
Thanks, Lacey. I once had a 12-page resume to review. 12 pages, and the text was really small text. I'll admit I didn't finish that. I didn't, and he didn't get the job. But he wrote a lot, so that was kind of cool. It wasn't cool. Don't do that. All right, Anu.
So I would definitely echo the same sentiment as Josh and Lacey. I am the point of contact. I'm one of 2 recruiters, so I would be your point of contact. I'm more than happy to be your advocate for you and for any of my candidates. And I state that, in my interview process, I state that. As I review resumes, I think Josh and Lacey can agree with me that, we're weeding out those candidates that really don't have any of the quantifiable skills. For example, maybe it's a manufacturing or an engineering role, and this is somebody who has been, maybe in retail, not a fit at that moment. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't be a fit down the road, but it's not a fit for that particular role. So to Lacey's point, really make sure that you're catering your resume to the opportunity that you're looking at. From that perspective, but also reach out, call out to someone, if you want to be able to make those connections, do it via LinkedIn. Pre-COVID, I would have said, invite someone to coffee with you, say, hey, or do it on Zoom. Hey, I'd love to connect with you over Zoom to learn a little bit more about the opportunity. And by doing that, you're not asking for the position, you're learning about the organization. And is there a fit from a culture perspective? Is there a fit from a future opportunity perspective? And, it's about really making sure that maybe you're top of mind awareness for that next person. But in our industry, from a recruiting perspective, it's never a no forever. It might just be a no for now. And so just go in with that mindset, thinking, okay, this is, it's all about timing.
Thanks, Anu. So one of the things I want to ask next is as far as things to avoid on the resume. So 12-page resumes are things to avoid. But let's talk about some other things that each one of you have seen. Let's start with Josh, please.
Sure. I would say that it's really important to, highlight what's most relevant first. So I've seen, sometimes people put an entire first page of, skills and technologies and just various things that are very great to have on the resume, but it takes up so much space before you really get to kind of the meat and potatoes of the actual content that you're looking for. You don't ever want somebody to need to go searching for, what your current role is or what you've done in the past. So you really want to try to make that as prominent as possible. Some of the other things that I would say possibly to avoid would be just anything that's not relevant to the specific job at hand. You might be applying to dozens of jobs before you get maybe even a phone call. So like someone else had said, it's really important to tailor it to each position. So if there is a prominent skill for one posting that you're applying to that wasn't in the other posting, you don't necessarily need to take up as many bullet points to highlight that specific skill. And for another role, it may be important. So it's just being aware of what they're looking for in that specific role. And that's why it could also be important to have a networking person within that company to help you find out what they're actually looking for, because sometimes you can't necessarily tell from the job description. So those are just some ideas.
Thanks, Josh. Lacey.
Yeah, I would say aside from the big no-no of definitely no more than 3 pages. And if you do need to shorten it, my big suggestion is, and this doesn't work for all companies again, I know like schools, I was just on a panel with somebody else talking about schools. Schools do need references, but we don't need references. We do a background check. And so if you need space, right, you're running into 3 to 4 pages, I would say don't put references down because again, not for all companies, but you can generally tell when you start doing an applicant tracking system, when they start asking you questions on your application. If they're not asking for references, I wouldn't put them in the resume. If that company would need references, they would most likely reach out to you and ask you in that case. So I say save the space, don't put references. Make sure your education is very legible. And then in the top, a lot of folks put objectives. I still think a professional summary is best as it relates to the role that you are applying to, as I mentioned. And something that we like to see at our company that we always think is kind of interesting and makes you stand out is if you have the space, you can put down your skills, hobbies, and interests. What we want to see is at our company, we're very big into volunteerism, United Way campaigns, giving back to the community. We love to see whether you're volunteering in your church, you're volunteering in a veterans group, you're, very into doing your own fun experiments on the weekend as an engineer because you like to continue learning. Things like that would make you, 1, stand out, but 2, it does still relate to your position at the company and maybe even the role you're applying to. So just big no-nos. Make sure you don't have longer than a 3-page resume, and then maybe take your references off if you do need the space.
Thanks, Lacey. Anu.
So we know real estate is a hot commodity, right? So I think one of the things that can help with keeping your resume to 3 pages or less is simply doing 1 line of contact information. It helps both, just simply having your name, maybe an email and a phone number. Versus having, your full address, contact information, cell, all points of contact, maybe put in your LinkedIn profile. And it's something that you can do on 1 line versus having it take up, an inch at the top of your resume. And the other thing I would recommend is be able to tell this, determine the story you want to be able to tell. If you are in supply chain, highlighting the key supply chain opportunities that you've had, that maybe you were deployed and had the opportunity to manage and navigate a whole deployment opportunity, but traditionally you're an aviator. And I state that example specifically because that was exactly the situation my husband was in, right? How does he go from telling the story that he was in supply chain and, coordinated events for deployment, but was also a pilot? So he had to determine what story makes the most sense, right? And so from a logistical perspective, he went the logistics route to be able to talk about that. So I would think about that as well as you look at those opportunities. The other thing that I would recommend, because I think in general as a whole, we don't necessarily need to call out the year we graduated from college, high school. Leave that piece off. State the program you were in. BS, MS, associates, whatever that program was. But I don't think there's necessarily a need for you to call out the year that it helps to eliminate bias for one thing, where somebody's, going, oh, this person graduated 20 years ago, they might be thinking about retirement, or, oh, they're a recent graduate, I don't know if they have enough experience. Let your resume speak for itself in terms of your qualities and attributes that can really lend itself to the role.
Thanks. Okay, so we're getting quite a few questions in, so I think now is a good time to do some Q&A. All right, so let's just start at the top. So Sean asks, is it better to try to connect with a person at a company prior to applying for a position, or better to apply first to the position and then contact and connect with somebody? And how critical is it to apply within the first few days of a job posting rather than after 1 or 2 weeks?
So I wonder if this is the Sean that I've talked to, but this is a very long question, but I'll try my best to get all the points down. I think that it can be either way for us at Xcel Energy. So for example, if I am out of the office and you receive an out of the office, I would much rather you just apply to the position. And when I get back, I can review it. I can look over it and say, hey, Sean, it looks like you didn't have this listed in your resume. Let's go back over it. Let's fix it. But if you don't apply to the posting and it comes down, I can't do anything for you. So it's not one way or the other. We can always fix it on the back end, but if you don't apply, I can't help you. But at the same time, if you can connect with somebody directly and right away, and I'm happy and available and you're looking to apply, that's great. And I can help you before you apply, give you the best tips and tricks so you don't have to fix anything in the long run. The other half of how important is it to apply, it really varies for us. So as I mentioned, some hiring leaders are like, I need this job posted and I want to start reviewing the qualified candidates as they come in. If they do that and you're applicant number 98 versus the job posted eight days ago, you may or may not make it to that review stage because they already have 15 qualified applicants, right? Sometimes hiring leaders will say, send me every qualified applicant. I don't care. I want to, if there are 50 of the 100, I'll see all 50. So it kind of depends on the hiring leader, but I always suggest if you sign up for email alerts on career sites and things like that, definitely check back frequently if you don't like the email alerts, and definitely apply as soon as you can, especially if you have somebody like myself or at Cargill or Anu who can look at your application right away, pull you out of that general applicant pool, review your application. If you're missing something, if it looks like something's wrong, we can get with you right away, get with the recruiter and kind of get it on the front end and then get you to the hiring leader for review first, or at least in those first handful of individuals. So I think applying as quickly as possible is definitely important. I think, reaching out beforehand is helpful, but if you don't hear back within 24 hours, I would say go for it from my perspective. We can fix it on the back end.
Thanks, Lacey. Any other thoughts?
One thing I would add is it's important to keep in mind how many positions you apply to. So once you create a profile within our company, we're able to see pretty much all of the roles you have ever applied to. And sometimes I log into somebody's profile and they have 98 applications with us. And I don't even want to go through all those or understand the background there. So it can be very overwhelming. So with that being said, it's just important to, like I was saying earlier, understand the actual qualifications of the role and then really applying to the ones that you only are truly qualified for. Sometimes, for instance, with Cargill, we have on our job postings required qualifications and then preferred qualifications. The preferred ones are truly just that, preferred. If you don't meet them, that's okay. Whereas the required ones, you do need to meet those. So just keep that in mind. And as far as the LinkedIn portion there, or reaching out to somebody, I myself am not opposed to sending a cold message on LinkedIn if you just happen to come across one of our recruiters and you don't even know them, but want to see if they might respond to you. I have done that in some past roles and have had success with that for finding jobs myself. So don't feel shy or bashful to do that. Now, I might not message the director or VP of the company, but if you're able to find somebody within the talent acquisition group, that's always a good idea.
Thanks, Josh.
I think one of the comments that I would just think about as we go through this process is when you submit your resume, you have to think about, what is going on at the time you apply for yourself. On the same token, think about that there might be another story for the hiring leader, for the company, for the position. So if you apply one day, but it's 2 weeks before you hear anything, or a month even, understand that it's not you and your qualifications. It may be the process. It may be that the position is on hold. It may be that the hiring leader is on vacation for 2 weeks and told the recruiter they wanted to hire yesterday, but they never bothered to tell them they were going on vacation. And that can and does happen. So when you think about the process and you go through it, don't let yourself get down because you haven't heard anything. But think about it that there are other underlying factors that are beyond your control, that are maybe even beyond the recruiter's control for that matter, and that it's a combination of budget, opportunity, timing. And so when you go to apply for a position, just think about it from that perspective. I know when I would apply for opportunities, I'd be like, why haven't they contacted me? I'm perfect for this job. I know I can do it. And it was just a matter of making sure that the timing was right for the position you were applying for. And unfortunately, that's not something we always have control over.
Thanks. All right, we'll do a couple more and then we'll go back to the other questions we had. Rhonda asks, what are companies doing as far as relocating candidates for a position? And what kinds, if any, relocation support is being offered?
So I think that's going to vary by company. I know at Xcel Energy, so if we do relocation, we will need to have that approved when we post that job. So generally they will know, hey, I can't find a local applicant. And the reason why we look at local applicants, veterans are a little bit different, especially if they're coming out, say from Germany or what have you, and they're coming back to the US and looking for a place to settle. It's a little bit different. But in general, what we try to do on the inclusion and diversity side of the house is to mirror the communities that we serve. And so that's a big reason why we look at our immediate community and try to hire locally. But we do have 8 different states. So say you're in Minnesota and you're willing to relocate to our Denver corporate office, what do? It has to be budgeted for us for that particular role. So and if it's not, and they find a great candidate and they say it can be filled in either Minnesota or Colorado and somebody wants to relocate, we would have to get that approved. And we do have a specific contract that we work with, and they have different relocation benefits. And so it'll depend on price, it depends on your pay grade, what level you're moving into, how far you're moving, and a myriad of other things. And then we do have a veteran specific relocation package, which has a little bit of what I would consider extra benefits in the event that they're coming off of active duty and that the military is going to pay for them to, say, move from Florida to Denver. Then we have a relocation package that has different benefits that wouldn't have to cover the moving costs if the military or DoD is going to pay for it. We have some other benefits. So we do have it. It has to be approved by position for that area. And then those packages each look a little bit different depending on pay grades and where they're moving from and where they're moving to.
Thanks, Lacey. Anybody else?
Sure. I would say Cargill seems pretty similar to Xcel on that standpoint. It really comes down to each specific position, whether or not we would offer relocation. One of the great things about working for a highly matrixed company is that we have hundreds of locations all throughout the US. So if you are someone who is able to and open to relocating, that really opens the doors for you in terms of your job prospects. And make sure that whenever you're speaking with an initial recruiter or a hiring manager, let them know that you're open to that. And if you have any preferred areas that you're open to moving to, even if they don't ask, I've been in situations where a candidate is interviewing for one role and they're not fit for that, and the hiring manager wants to interview them for another position or pass them along to one of their colleagues to interview for their team, possibly in a different location. So if you're open to that, that will really open up your chances of landing a job.
Thanks, Josh. Let's talk resumes for a second here, and we're going to keep going through the audience questions. Alan asks, on the topic of resumes, how do you feel about combination format resumes with work history listed in a table format versus the more traditional chronological resumes? As long as the work history is listed, is that acceptable?
So my resume is actually a combination format resume, just because my work experience is very kind of all over the place between my National Guard duties, leadership experience. And so I think it's easier for me to segment it out in that way. And then I do list my top level, jobs when I worked there and what those titles are. So from my perspective, I think as long as you're still including the appropriate quantifiable information as it relates to a role, I don't see that there's any preference, honestly. And recruiters, from what I've been told, it's kind of their personal preference. Some might say, hey, I prefer one format over the other, but really it's what's the content in there. So I don't have a preference.
Thanks, Lacey. Any other thoughts on resume format? Okay, a couple other questions here that actually are really relevant. Dave asks, other than searching LinkedIn profiles at target companies, how does one connect with a person in a company who is a veteran recruiter, assuming such a person exists within the company?
A veterans website. Generally, most veteran-friendly companies will have a veterans or an inclusion and diversity page that links to a veterans page. But more often than not, they have a veterans web page. So like Xcel Energy, you go to the careers page, you see all the jobs, and then there's like a what we offer, and it has inclusion and diversity, it has veterans. And then on there, you could find my veterans email. You can find what we call a veterans general interest posting. It's an evergreen posting. So it's on the careers page. It looks like a job posting, but it's not for a specific job. You can click on it. You can fill it out as a profile so that I can review your resume. I get pinged saying, hey, Lacey Golonka is a veteran. And then I can look at your resume. I tag you in our applicant tracking system as a veteran. So that's another way to do it. And again, those links is one on the careers page, but also a veterans page. And large companies, for sure, most of them that are veteran friendly do have a veterans page that talks about, their business resource groups and the benefits they have for vets. And it should generally also have a contact section for if they have a veteran recruiter or a veterans liaison or what have you.
Sure. Another thing you can do is whoever you do get in contact with at the company, just asking them, hey, might you have a military recruiter? Or sometimes they might not necessarily have a specific military recruiter, but they may have a diversity recruiter, and that person may work with veterans under their diversity bucket. So just feel free to ask. Sometimes they might not, and that's no harm there, but certainly let them know that you'd be open to networking with somebody focused on that.
Great. Also, Sheila mentions in the chat to call the company's 800 number, ask the operator to put you through to the recruiter that handles military veterans. And if they have one, they will put you through. And she mentions that she gets calls occasionally routed to her that way. And one other option in too is a lot of times when you're talking to the military recruiting community is fairly small. You know, a lot of the military recruiters know each other too. And when you're going through that process, it's okay to ask, hey, do you know a recruiter over at Target or you know, at Honeywell or something? A lot of times that network will also work. Okay, couple more questions here. This is a good one, actually. If I attended college for a few years but did not graduate, should I admit any reference to having attended?
I would put it on there. You can either put, if you're still working towards it but you haven't graduated, you can put an expected graduation date. If you're not currently enrolled and not currently working towards it, you can put your degree and then the credits that you do have. Because, you know, maybe you're not going right now because you're going to your NCOES for the Guard, and so you're taking a break from school for a year. That's fine, but then you know you're going to pick it back up later. I suggest still putting it on there, whether you put, you know, that you're currently enrolled in an expected graduation or how many credits you have and what that degree was that you were working towards.
Great. Any other thoughts? Okay, so for the audience, again, go ahead and just throw your questions in the Q&A or the chat. Q&A, again, is a little bit easier to manage as far as tracking the questions because they stay in one block versus the chats tend to scroll, you know, keep on scrolling up. But just toss your questions in there. And what we'll do is we'll just take pauses throughout this panel and answer your questions. Okay, let's go back and talk a little bit about soft skills. You know, we talk a lot about the hard skills and hard qualifications for veterans to apply, and we either have them or we don't. It's pretty much how it comes down to. But the soft skills, how does a candidate demonstrate soft skills throughout the whole hiring process? How do I demonstrate it on my resume? I say I'm good with people. Okay, it's on the resume, so it must be true. How do I do that? And let's start with Anu.
Thank you. I think it's a combination of being able to answer those questions. How are you handling a difficult situation? What does that look like? Can you list an example? So when you think about the process that you're going through and you've gotten to the phone screen portion, that's your time to shine. You're going to connect with that recruiter. And I think, you know, I don't want to speak for Lacey and Josh, but usually within the first 3 to 5 minutes, I can tell, you know, am I going to have a good conversation? How is it going? Am I able to build rapport with this candidate? And some of those ways that you're doing that is being able to just have a conversation and just, you know, really, you know, get the small talk out of the way, but being able to have that conversation in general, but be able to showcase when you're having that conversation, okay, yeah, what is your greatest achievement or what was a difficult situation you had? So, you know, that question in and of itself talks about how you maybe were up against a timeline or dealing with a challenging person who maybe, you know, it's not everybody gets along, but you have to work with everybody, right? And so being able to talk about the challenging situation. And so that can showcase your hard skills from that perspective to be able to say, oh, you know, in any situation, they're able to address X, Y, and Z, or, you know, this is how they've addressed it, and this is how they've been proactive with it. And, you know, being able to give an example, you know, talk about it, state it, the task, the results, you know, and have it done in a methodical way can allow for that soft skill perspective because it shows that, you know, you're aware and you've got that personal awareness that, okay, I need to be mindful of what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, and how it's conveyed.
Thanks, Anu. Lacey.
Yeah, so what Anu is talking about is exactly what we do at Xcel Energy with our interviews, and it's called the STAR format. So it's situation, task, action, and then result. And so some of those questions that we would ask in an interview would be, give me an example of a time when you worked on a project with somebody that had a differing view or opinion than you did. And then what was the outcome of the project? How did you work with that person, right? So that's going to show that you can adapt and overcome, that you're inclusive, that you could have a bad result, right? Like, and that's also totally okay in an interview. You can say that I didn't agree, with Josh on a project and we actually didn't get it done. Neither of us could agree. And so they gave it to 2 other individuals, right? But what you learn from it, and that's what you want to bring to the table, right? This is what we didn't do. We didn't communicate. We didn't, adapt to these different ideas or what have you. So again, to Anu's point, STAR format, best way to answer any of our interview questions. We always use those questions, and we'll always generally ask for an example of something that you have to provide those details to. In a resume, it's definitely a little bit harder, right? And that's where I say if you can put in there that you were promoted ahead of peers or that you were hand selected for a particular project as it relates to stakeholder management or, community engagement. So you grew the engagement. If you can show that you got this many more companies or communities involved in something, that shows us, hey, this person can connect different stakeholders within the business, with outside of the business, with varying backgrounds and bring them together. That's kind of a way in a resume a little bit harder to prove, but you can still kind of show some of those soft skills as well.
Thanks, Lacey. Josh?
Sure. I love what both Lacey and Anu said. I honestly think it's a lot about all of the energy that you bring to the entire hiring process. Like Anu was saying, you really can tell how a conversation is going to go, sometimes just from the way you say hello when you pick up the phone. So that energy that you bring and enthusiasm for wanting to work for whatever company you're applying for, do whatever field you're going to do, it's very important. And your situational awareness too of the room, whether or not you're speaking with one person or a panel of people, all makes a difference. I was just on a review call this morning from a few rounds of interviews that a hiring manager has had. And one of her feedback on one of the candidates was he had really great technical skills, but he talked to the entire time and we couldn't even get to most of our questions, and that's just not going to fly with some of our clients, so he didn't get selected. So just knowing that and being aware of who you're speaking with, how you're responding, and of yourself most of all will go a long way, because they'll know whether or not you have the skills kind of just from looking at your resume. And what they're really looking for is also saying, is this somebody I'd want to work with? So keep that in mind as you're speaking with the recruiter or the hiring manager.
Josh, you just kind of brought something up that got me thinking too. When you're going through that interview, especially if you're in a customer facing role, how you communicate is so critical. Because if I'm not a good communicator and it's a customer facing role, there could be some challenges to that. So, but here's a question for each one of you guys is, we all have times when we just kind of flub things. Maybe it's at the beginning of a panel that you're running and you get all tangled up. We all have that. How can a candidate recover? Maybe midway through that process or at the end of the process? Is there any chance to recover from those moments? And I'm just going to leave that open to any one of you three.
Yeah, I think there certainly is. If you realize that you've, said something or didn't necessarily do the best in one question, that by no means doesn't mean you can't recover. And always at the end, you can ask the interviewer, hey, is there any doubts that you have about my application, or just anything I haven't gone over that you would like to know more about? That way you can really see what hesitations they might have. And then from there, if they do have some feedback or say, hey, you're kind of missing out on this one area, you'd be able to talk about it at that point. So that's always a great question to ask.
Thanks, Josh.
I think it's important to be able to take a deep breath, to recognize, that in and of itself is you calling yourself out, going, okay, you don't have to rush the conversation. Talk through what you're looking for and make sure you're taking deep breaths through the process. I've had candidates where I'm like, okay, just take a second and breathe. And, let's walk through this together. And, I think that's really important to think about. Write your notes out, keep them in front of you. You don't have to have it memorized, but have some key points jotted down that can help your pace. It can help, you think about what you want to call out that's important to you, and just really thinking about the situations from the STAR method to, difficult, opportunities where you've had to, influence without being the leader, right? I think everybody does that. And being able to, say how you've been able to make that change. So those are some things I would also think about as well.
Thanks. So now, as I was looking at the time, we're kind of getting closer to the end. What we're going to do for these next questions is I'm going to ask them to two of you, and then the next question we'll ask to two. So we're going to kind of start dividing these up a little bit. During the interview, what should candidates avoid doing? Whether you're a phone interview, whether it's a video interview, whether it's in person, what are the things that you should really avoid? Let's start with Lacey.
Always still dress up, right? We've seen in some virtual interviews that people think it's a free-for-all, and it is not. You still want to be very professional. I think the other things to avoid is really, we talked about bringing energy. I do get feedback from hiring managers that hire vets, and they say, hey, this veteran, was sitting in the chair, like rolling around and looking away, and like they weren't really in tune. I don't even feel like they wanted the job. The other thing I would say is a big no-no in job interviews is when somebody asks, why do you want the job? I hope that you have an answer as to why you truly want it. We've had folks come in and go, I just need a paycheck, or, well, it was available. That to us is, well, that means you can do the job, but are you going to then leave, or, where's your passion? So make sure you're ready to answer that, because a lot of times it's, why do you think you're a good fit for this job, but why do you want the job? So just, I think a thing that I have seen is a lot of folks will just, not be professional, and then also just say, well, I'm here for a paycheck or whatever. It just looked good. I'm bored. And those don't sit very, very well, I would say. As a veteran, one of the things that we see that we know is hard, but we do training at the company for this, is veterans tend to, be very stiff, be very personable. It's totally different than being boarded for a promotion, right? But be a little bit more personable. And then as you start to say things, I'm a battalion first sergeant here. Let me explain to you what that means. It means this many people, these are my roles and responsibilities. Take that extra second to catch yourself and go, oh, they probably don't know what that is. Let me explain why this is important. I think would be some of my top suggestions.
Thanks, Lacey. Josh.
Sure. A couple things that I would say to avoid. Avoid getting down on yourself. Sometimes it takes lots of positions to apply to, lots of people to speak with before you're going to find the right role. And in fact, I always tell my candidates, hey, there's a good chance this isn't going to work out. We have lots of applicants here. So if that happens, let's keep the conversation going. Don't think that one rejection means you're not a good fit for Cargill in general. So always keep that door open. And another thing to avoid would be whenever somebody turns you down, don't, you can certainly be disappointed, but don't treat that person poorly. You always want to make a good impression, even when you are being turned down. So, thank them for their time and let them know that you're still open to keeping the door open as well. You always really want to leave a good impression, because you never know what might come up for you in the future.
Thanks, Josh. This one, a question from or a comment from the audience. So it'll be open to anybody here to answer, is to what extent would military experience fill the void on your resume? So specifically things like military education, professional education, service schools, and how do I capture that in a way that's transferable?
Are we talking about leadership schools and maybe like, I have a couple of different examples when it comes to technical certifications. CDL Class A's is one of them. They're transferable from the military into civilian sector. The other one is like mechanics. You can actually, we've worked with our union to get folks that have certifications from the service, depending on their MOS, NEC, AFSC, what have you, to be translated into certifications. So you could ask, again, the recruiter, myself, or whoever's at the company, what that translation would be. The other one is your leadership schools. They're probably not going to understand exactly what, senior leadership course is. So what you want to kind of highlight in there is that means you're now in charge of X number of individuals, and these are your new duties, roles, and responsibilities as a platoon sergeant, as a first sergeant, as a whatever rank you are, a lieutenant, and anything like that. And really explain what those leadership skills are, instead of just saying you went to your officer basic course as an education piece at the bottom, because that doesn't really mean much for anybody. You would kind of highlight those leadership experiences and at what level that is, I think. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
It does. It does. Thank you. Okay, next question. We'll start with a new one, this one. For the offer. So congratulations, you get an offer. When you extend an offer to a candidate, what should they know? And what can they ask or negotiate within reason? And what should they avoid doing?
Great question. So during my process, I've had a little bit more control over the salary piece. I tell every candidate, I vet out the salary piece in the first 10 minutes of the conversation, because I would hate to get them to the 11th hour. We love them, they love us, but we were not aligned on salary. So I work to make sure that we're aligned at the beginning of the conversations, even if it's someone it's the very first conversation. Folks sometimes maybe aren't prepared. And so one of the questions I ask is, where do you want to be from a compensation perspective? Not where are you today? Because where they are today may be very different than the compensation they desire. And that does a couple of things. It allows us to understand where their skill set is, but where their compensation level has been or where they want to be, essentially. So when it comes time from the offer perspective, I am sharing with them, and I have throughout the process, that it comes with full benefits. I explain the benefits and what that looks like. I share the salary piece and, if it comes with a bonus opportunity or not, and where they can decide. All they can do is ask. And so what I would encourage, candidates to do is ask. If they are looking for, say, a sign-on bonus, because yes, they are partially relocated, but they haven't, and this position doesn't traditionally pay relocation, it'd be really helpful as I get through this process to move to have some sort of bonus, sign-on bonus. Is there an opportunity for that? Again, all the candidate has to do is ask, and it's, the recruiter should then be able to say, well, this isn't eligible for that, or let me see what I can find out. Because if they don't ask, then that's something that they might be losing out on. And it might be an opportunity that they've said, well, I was missing that $5,000 piece from a sign-on bonus perspective, and it could have been something that the organization could have easily done. The things that are non-negotiable for an organization tend to be the standard benefits, medical, dental, 401k, right? If an opportunity doesn't come with a 401k, it's not going to come with a 401k. And so, or, the vesting schedule, we can't control the vesting schedule, but what we can control is maybe we have a little more flexibility on PTO. So if the organization maybe offered 15 days, maybe there's an opportunity for them to get a handful more days of vacation time. Because as we know, coming from the military, having 30 days of vacation and then coming into the civilian world and you're getting sometimes 2 weeks, it can be definitely eye-opening for sure. So I would think about that piece as well. So, quickly, I would say PTO is something that can always be negotiated, and, maybe an additional sign-on bonus if they're have maybe more extenuating circumstances than most. But if the offer is pretty solid from what they're looking for, it's okay to accept it without having to do a traditional negotiation, because most companies like to come with their best foot forward as well. They're not trying to take you for a ride.
Thanks, Anu. Josh.
Sure. I would say something that helps in the offer stage is being upfront throughout the entire hiring process. For an example, I was speaking with a candidate a few weeks ago, and in my very first screening call with her, before she even applied to the role, she let me know that on Fridays, she needs to attend an in-person class for her master's degree that she's currently completing. And from that conversation, I was able to let the hiring manager know, and he said, okay, that's not a big deal for this role. For some positions, it might be. So when you get down to the offer stage, it's always helpful if you really told them upfront the entire time. You know, if it's a role that requires relocation and you don't let them know, you're going to need to check with the whole family, and then you get offered the position and you can't relocate, it might not look as great for some other roles that you could be qualified for in the future. So really just try to be upfront about where you stand throughout the entire process. I found that companies will generally do that as well. As far as what you can go back and ask, you know, in terms of salary, if you tell the company you're wanting $75,000 for your salary and they come back and offer you at 80,000, and you know, you really don't want to then go back and say, hey, can I have 85,000? Because you already got more than you asked for. So just be aware, you know, and respectful, and generally the same will happen for you. And also just keep in mind timeline. It's totally okay to, you know, take a few days to a week to review the offer, discuss it with your family. That's pretty standard. But then at that point, let them know and get back to them in a timely manner as far as whether or not you want to accept the offer. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. There's a question that just came in that really applies to this topic. If healthcare benefits are not needed, and I would kind of extend that to really almost any of the benefits are not needed, can salary be adjusted upward to compensate for a candidate declining healthcare or additional benefits? That's open to anybody.
From my experience, I've seen that potentially with contracting roles. So if you know that it's going to be a contract position, usually they can be a little more flexible for the salary to compensate for the benefits. I haven't necessarily experienced that in the corporate world. It would never hurt to ask, I would say. So just let them know what you might be needing and that benefits are an important part of your consideration. And if they're not as great as your current company or offered at all, you can always ask them to see if they can compensate, whether it be with salary or maybe some type of sign-on bonus.
Thanks. Any other comments on that question?
I think for me, that actually applies to me. So I don't use my company benefits because I'm in the Guard. I use TRICARE. We actually don't, I wouldn't say that's part of the salary negotiation. Salaries are generally, we have a pay band and they're actually posted on our job postings. And just for everybody's information, because most people don't know this, is those salary bands for us anyways in a regulated utility industry, they have a pay band, and what they look at is internal equity as well as your experience, and they cross-reference that with internal equity. So we can't pay you exponentially more than somebody that has that same experience that you do, and that is the same pay grade across the board. We have to maintain that, but we do post how much that salary is. Never take less than what you want, because that leads to attrition, right? You're just going to end up leaving the company. I would still ask, though, if you're going to use, for example, like in my case, TRICARE, you're not going to use company benefits, still ask and see what they'll do. Maybe they'll give you more paid time off days or something to that effect, but usually it doesn't directly impact salary, maybe a few $1,000s here and there at most.
One thing I would be mindful of is sometimes it's an all or nothing with the benefits program to be able to participate maybe in the 401k. Which can impact your retirement down the road. I mean, and if you're retiring from the military, it also may be something different for you, but just be mindful of that. You know, what you might not need benefits, but if you're getting a matching and a vesting schedule from a 401k, and maybe the conditions of that are that it's an all or nothing where you're in the benefit program, that might be the case. So just be aware of that.
Thanks. Okay, last question. And I'll just combine a couple of these. And this one I'm going to actually do for all three of you. How do you help military employees get up to speed within your organization? And what advice do you have for a new hire to do in their first 90 days? And let's start with Anu. And let's start with Anu for this question.
I think in the first 90 days, I would definitely kind of connect with key stakeholders, learn about the position, learn what you want, understand the changes that are going to be made without making any recommendations. So in that first 90 days, really be the observer to understand the culture, the fit, the nuances in a role. And that'll help set you up for success, because then you can go in, you know, in the second set of 90 days and go, okay, these are the things that I see that could change, that could be better, that, you know, all the reasons that you're there from a process improvement perspective. Some organizations will also definitely put you with a partner to, you know, answer the basic questions like, you know, what does the day-to-day look like, and how do I do that? And, you know, where do I go? Or, you know, and that can often be somebody in HR or somebody within the business group to support you as you start that transition.
Thank you. Lacey.
So we do what we call a new hire connection. So a lot of folks know, hey, Xcel Energy, they're my utility provider, but they don't realize how diversified our portfolio is. So we do a new hire connection. It's 2 days. It's actually technically 3 with some networking opportunities, but they talk about the business, how we're in 4 different opcos, how many people we serve, what our business model is, what our vision, mission, values are. So you get a really high level of what the company is. And so all of the new hires will go through that. Even if you're a contractor and you roll into a full-time role, you'll go to the new hire connection to understand the breadth of the business. And again, those vision, mission, values are customer facing focus and things to that nature. I would say first 90 days, seek out your mentor. And the best way that we have that set up is during New Hire Connection. We have all of 12 of our business resource groups representatives. So if you're a veteran and you want to find a veteran mentor who is either a female or a male or was in former intelligence, or, you know, somebody that you identify with that you want to have as a mentor, you seek them out. Business resource groups are a phenomenal way to do that. But definitely seek a mentor that they can help you navigate and get you connected through that company in the first 90 days.
Thanks, Lacey. And Josh.
Sure, I would say a couple things. If I'm entering a new role, I would learn as much as possible, you know, that I can. You learn some throughout the interview process, but then once you actually step into the role, there's so much you can learn about the company, the position itself, set up calls with your teammates, with other stakeholders and peers, and continue networking. If your company has anything like a business resource group, you could always join that and get involved there and really establish those connections. And as far as specific onboarding process, Cargill, we have it set up where each group is kind of unique. So there isn't necessarily one standard veteran onboarding across the board, but that is also something you can ask up front during the interview process. Hey, what's the onboarding like for this specific role? Just so you can be prepared and know what situation you'll be walking into when you actually start. So those are a few ideas that you can do when moving into the position.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so this concludes the formal portion of our panel. I'll just see if there's any other questions for the audience. Please feel free to add them to the chat or the Q&A at this time. I just want to thank Josh, Lacey, and Anu for the time that you took. The insight was incredible, and so it's greatly appreciated. So I'm going to do one last check here for questions, and not seeing any. So for all the audience, I believe that Anu, Lacey, and Josh have all put their contact information in at the bottom here just recently. And so feel free to reach out and connect with them on email, on LinkedIn, on Carrier Pigeon, however you want. I don't have a Carrier Pigeon, but I wish I did, because that would be cool. So, all right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Adam and Bob.
All right. Well done, Mike. As always, thank you so much. And again, to our panel, can't thank all of you enough. Anu, Lacey, Josh, really appreciate it. Just got a lot of comments from folks here that this was just a really dynamic and active panel here today. So really appreciate, provide some really great insights. So again, these are, this is one of the most important meetings we have every year. I think just based on the nature of what we do and what we focus on. So we're really, really grateful for you guys being here for this and for sharing. We're looking forward to speaking with you again in the future and talk with you in between meetings. So very, very grateful to all of you. Thank you. All right, so with that, what we're going to do then is now we're moving